challenging matter. Because we want something that's really going to be something that has an effect on people. Yes, Aaron.
But then won't that be a very short story? Because they're like both options are like not wrong.
Yesterday we looked at two types of change ratio.
Okay, hi parents, it's already 7 o'clock, and yeah, just like our lessons at TCher Online, we always start on time, and we have a 10 minutes free lesson task, so we want the students to come early, and yeah, but generally, yes, we do start on time. So it's already 7 o'clock, and so I'm going to just introduce myself and say hi to Jermaine, JW, Jia Yue, Mei Chuan, and Patricia. Hi. If you can turn on the camera and just wave, and then you want to turn it off because it's not so convenient, it'll be so wonderful. Yay, Patricia, your
Hello.
number one fan of
Yeah.
TCher.
She doesn't know. She has no idea.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So nice to see
My child really benefits in her class. Really
that's so nice to hear.
The quietest child you wouldn't know.
Oh dear.
But she's learning well. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're so welcome.
So wonderful. Yeah, so good to see TCher Online parents and so spontaneous. Thank you so much. You're always very encouraged. Oh, I can see Jia Yue already. You turn it on and off. How about Jermaine, Mei Chua, and JW? If you can, just say hi. Okay, and I have a friend, Chungi. Wonderful. Okay, now I'm going to do a very quick introduction, and then I'm going to hand over the time to teacher Jobeth. She's also our head of English at TCher Online. Okay, so I think because we have maybe just one or two visitors, some of them are not here yet, but it's fine. Okay, we will begin. So I think, where was I just now? I think I was here. You can see. Maybe you can also say hi via the chat box, and let us know your name, and as well as your child, like which level he or she is in. It will be amazing. And also, even right now, you can type in the chat box, like questions that you'd like to ask Jobeth. It would be amazing. And also, like, what kind of a situation you're facing right now with him or her in regards to English or reading. It would be good to start the ball rolling. Okay, I'll be actually curating, so to speak, put the questions together, and then you'll save a lot of time later on. Okay, so this is me, Andrew. If you do not know me, used to be in MOE like Jobeth. So we are actually educators from MOE, and now we are out into the fields, so to speak. Doing private education. So we are at online school. I'll call ourselves an online school, but offering academic coaching, tuition, enrichment, and an extension. And yet at the same time, we want to support what MOE is doing, right, to help your children achieve academic grades. And at the same time, we also like to, excite and engage your children and students, right, to like and to love the subject. And we do, very often encourage your children to study really hard, and also conduct a lot of parenting workshops like this, right, to educate and to help parents in their parenting journey. Okay, so my core team, you want to say why Sherwin is so inside here, but Sherwin, our science head, is not in this particular picture. Okay, and then we have Jenny Yo, who is an ex-principal, a veteran principal, and so she's our academic consultant, very experienced, right, principal of Running Mass, VP of ACS, and also Southview Primary School. Okay, and then we have Vicky as the math head, Jobeth English, and Sherwin as the science head. And our teachers right now, yes, 100% are all former MOE teachers, and they are the more or very outstanding teachers who have left the service. And so we do screen and make sure that they are really very outstanding and they have the heart to teach. Okay, so very quickly, this is what we do, right? At the end of the day, you want your kids to improve their grades. And so this is what we really hope to do and achieve. But yet at the same time, they are able to do so not by just drills and practices, but really learning, deep diving into the subject. And at the same time, also go beyond the syllabus to not just prepare for PSLE or SA1, SA2, because I think there's more to life than that, than PSLE. It's not like the only thing that everyone should be studying for. And so we also prepare your children, and we encourage all our kids at TCher Online to actually participate in the English, Math, Science Olympiads, because we want them to, go for the competition, to enjoy learning, and also to be motivated, to compete. And also to get to know a lot of friends from many other countries, like 30, 34 countries. Some of these competitions are held a few times a year, and there are like 34, 40 countries, children participating in the contest. Okay, so we want to stretch and challenge our students. Okay, so what we have here for like Patricia, you're very familiar, but for those who are not, we do have online learning, live stream. So we believe in live stream learning because it's a scheduled time. You have to meet the teacher and you get ready and you do your homework, you do your prep. So I think live stream is really important. Just like now, you'll be sitting there for like listening for an hour. So to replay, and if it's just video learning, it's really a bit difficult. Your kids will tend to fast forward or skip the whole part or stop halfway and then, okay, that's it for me. Okay, so we believe in both synchronous, asynchronous learning, meaning it's live stream, but at the same time, we provide you with the video resources. Okay, so currently, if you sign up with TCher Online, for example, right now it's in April. If you're a P6 a parent, you have a child in P6, you actually get the once a week live lessons or twice a week, depending on what kind of packages you're buying. At the same time, we are giving you the 36 or 48 videos of that subject of the whole year, meaning from January. So it's for example, it's last year January to October lessons. We started actually only in March last year. So you'll be getting like this year January to March, and then last year April to October. So what I'm trying to say is that once you sign up with us once a week live lessons, you actually get the whole syllabus or the whole lessons video for P6. And so you'll be able to learn, revise January, February topics, because January and February, March, they're all long gone, right? A few months back. But when you join us right now, you actually get the videos right now, and also the topics that will be taught all the way up to October. Okay, so you are given the resources available to do well for the PSLE. And if you want to, you can also purchase the P5, P4 lesson videos. And if you want to purchase the other videos, really very, very reasonable. Because we have a very strong social mission to help the students, and our profit is not number one on our list. It's really to help kids learn better and make it affordable for most families. Okay, then these are some of the highlights, features of our lessons. And it's amazing, now we have paying students from 18 countries. So you will like sometimes see students from other countries. For example, in the P4 English on Monday, I think there are 5 nationalities from Hong Kong, Japan, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore. So it's amazing for your children to join us, can actually make friends with students from other countries, and they are taking the PSLE. They may not be taking PSLE at the home country, but they really like the rigor of our system and PSLE curriculum. Okay, let's see what do I have. I think I'm almost done. Okay, so this is something we hold dear to, the quote that children are the true wealth of our nation, and in them lies the hope of our nation. So we do whatever we can to impart values, to help them develop characters, and also to challenge them academically. Human resource is the only resource in the sense that we have in Singapore. So we want them to really do their best, to the ability to study really hard and go as far as they can. At the same time, develop their talent. Okay, I'm done. Now I'm going to introduce, Jobev. I've known her for a few years and she's amazing. And she's our head of English. I'm going to give her more time to introduce herself and also our curriculum and then I think the topic as well. So maybe you can share a little bit about our English curriculum and yourself. Thank you. So I'll stop share now.
Hi parents, good to see all of you this evening, although I can't see all of your faces. I'm very used to this, by now, I think in 2021, that when I teach, I see a whole bunch of gray screens and not human faces anymore. So if you feel like doing so, it would be great if you could turn on your cameras. If not, it's fine, it's okay. I understand sometimes it's a bit pressurizing to have the camera on all the time. Hi, Sammy's mom. So today I just wanted to really introduce myself quickly. My name is Jobeth Williams. I used to be an MOE teacher a long time ago in a previous life. Left MOE because I had some very demanding children. And so I left to take care of them. And now that they're a little bit bigger, I have time to give back. And so when I met Andrew kind of got me into this teaching gig. So I really think that I think 2 years ago, maybe even 1.5 years ago, we weren't really sure that online learning was going to be something that would take off or something that would be so much a part of our lives. And now it's just, it's unthinkable to be doing without digital learning. I think it's really great because I now get to teach kids from, all over Singapore. There's no rush to get to a center. There's no rush to leave. They're not running from one place to another. They're at home in a safe space. So I think that's really great about online teaching. I won't talk too much about the curriculum. I think I'll save that for later. Maybe I will just go straight into my presentation for today. All right, so I think most of you parents have kids who are maybe primary 4, primary 5, primary 6. Feel free to let me know in the chat box, okay, how old your kids are. I think some of you did mention. So today is I really wanted to share with you guys about enticing the reluctant reader. I think that a lot of our kids don't like to read. It's a big thing. It's a very important thing to me as a teacher and as a parent, as someone who loves English in general, that reading was such a huge part of my life. It still is a huge part of my life, even though a lot of my reading is now done online, to be quite honest. But reading is such a huge part of my life. And I always felt that reading is the reason that my English improved quickly as a kid, that I continued to enjoy English so much. The reason why grammar and vocabulary tends to be more instinctive. So I don't think I need to sell reading to you. I'm quite sure all of you parents are very sure that reading is something that is good. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how we can encourage our kids to read. All right, so can I just get a quick idea from all of you? If your kids are reading, if your kids are not reading, what are some common complaints maybe you've heard from your own children about why they like to read or whether they don't like to read? Just a quick buzz in the chat box. You love reading, your kid doesn't know, dear. Yeah, so a lot of children, when I was teaching in school, I would schedule in a library session. I'm not just for myself, of course. I mean, it was a program that we had in our school that we would dedicate 1 hour every week to a library visit. So we had a very nice library in our school, and we would bring the kids down to borrow books. And I can tell you, it would take 15 minutes out of my 50-minute lesson, 15 to 20 minutes would be spent by the students just browsing and not being able to decide what they wanted to read. So 20 minutes would pass by and I would still have kids standing in front of the bookshelf. And very typically they would pick up a book, they would flip through it and they would say, "Teacher, the words are so tiny. I don't want to borrow this book. I don't want to read this, it's too small." Or they look at the thickness of the book, and if it's very thick, they'll be like, no, immediately turned off. They don't want to read it. Some of them read a chapter and they say it's boring, they're not interesting. Some of them complain that there are no pictures. I had kids who would go for comics and for manga and for graphic novels. And I think one very common complaint that I heard from a lot of my kids was that, "Teacher, I have no time to read. I read half a book or I read 1/3 of the book and I can't finish, I have no time. You asked me to study for my exam, so I have no time to read. I only have time to study. I only have time for my CCA." So they find it very difficult to finish an entire book. So these are some common complaints. I don't know if you find them familiar. I certainly did as a teacher, and even now with my own children. All right, so these are some common complaints that I hear from kids with regards to reading. So I think that definitely it is important to know exactly why reading is such a coveted thing. Why do we want them to read? Why is reading so very important? Now, I know there's a lot of stuff on the screen. Let me just go through it really quickly. Now, reading is important because it allows kids to pick up a language very naturally. All right, it's very difficult, I think, for kids to be explicitly taught grammar, to sit down and say, okay, here is grammar rule number 1. Now you have to understand grammar rule number 1. Here's grammar rule number 2 and number 3, number 4. Now it's very difficult. And a lot of us pick up, in fact, how we learn to speak, how we learn to read is that we speak to so many people, we speak the language so often that it becomes second nature. So the same for reading. And when kids read enough and read widely, they internalize all these grammar structures instead of having to tell them this is how it works. So the good thing about English in Singapore is that they are not expected to be able to explain grammar rules. Now, in some other countries, they are expected to explain. They might be expected to understand how to diagram a sentence. They may be asked to identify a verb in a sentence, for example. And I don't think that children need to know explicitly what a verb is in order to speak English well, in order to read well, in order to write well. We teach it in school because it does help, but if you don't know exactly what a verb is, does it mean you can't speak English? Of course not. Now, I'm sure a lot of you actually wouldn't be able to explain what a gerund is, what a past participle is, which is because when we were in school as kids ourselves, English was not taught explicitly. Grammar was not taught explicitly. We were expected to internalize it. It was very implicit. Now things are slightly changing, and so they're trying to do things a little bit differently, but definitely reading, and I always tell my kids, reading is such a fun way to study. There's no other subject where you can sit down with a storybook and consider it studying. Okay, so definitely vocabulary, they widen their vocabulary, they pick up a lot of new words. Reading also teaches them how plots work, so how a storyline works, how characters work. For example, most stories would have a very typical good guy, bad guy, maybe someone who is a little bit black and white, not black and white, but gray, so they understand characters, stock characters. Definitely reading also expands their worldview. I think one of the issues that a lot of our kids face is that they don't really know much beyond their own world, right? So when we talk about in school, for example, we talk about things that happen in other countries, stories from other countries or information from about other social issues. A lot of them are not really sure what's going on. Okay, so reading definitely expands their worldview beyond just what they are used to. It drives creativity, there's critical thinking, and my favorite point of all is that when kids are reading, they are quiet and they can sit in their room. And parents, when our kids are too quiet, it gets very suspicious. I'm sure you know what I mean, right? When the kids are very quiet, you're like, what are they doing? But it's such a joy to realize that they're quiet because they're in their rooms, reading a book, something that is engaging, something that is interesting, something that is active learning. Okay, if they read widely, if they enjoy reading, and if they keep reading, they actually pick up 4,000 to 12,000 words per year. Now that's really a lot. All right, so that's quite significant. Now, how do we get our kids to love reading? Now, loving to read definitely requires a shift in attitude. They have to change this attitude of reading is boring, reading is tiring, reading is so troublesome, to change the attitude to thinking that reading is something that is fun, it's positive, it is so easy to carry another world around with you in your bag. Nowadays you can even read ebooks, they don't even have to carry around a book if they want to. We have Kindles, they can download ebooks onto their mobile devices. All these can work. All right, now what is one way we can definitely start introducing books to our kids? Now, the number one way, the easiest way, the most passive way is to grow your own home library. Now, there have been a lot of research and studies done, and they actually found that, teenagers who, even though they may have had lower levels of secondary education, but came from homes that were filled with books, parents who had their own home libraries, parents who bought books for their kids, they became just as literate, just as numerate, it means good with words, good with numbers, and just as technologically apt in adulthood as university graduates who only had a few books at home. Now, the interesting thing is this, that the study said, you don't even have to be reading the books. Just having books at home, okay, was enough to trigger this effect. Because the idea behind it is that parents who love books, who like books enough to have them at home, would also have a home environment that appreciates learning, a home environment that, pushes them to find out more on their own, to encourage a love of learning. Okay, so when kids have a home library, and this is, library sounds like a very big thing, right? Like shelves and shelves. I don't know how many of you have watched Beauty and the Beast, the original cartoon movie when I was young, and, Beast brings Beauty into his home library, and it's just floor to ceiling with ladders of books. I was like, oh, this is my dream world, But a home library does not have to be floor to ceiling books, as few as 20 books of their own. On average, these kids achieve 3 more years of schooling than children who actually don't have any books at home. So it's a really very small thing to have a very big effect. All right, so how can we grow a home library? Now, it's really important to have a range of books, books that are suitable for all ages, all abilities, different genres, different themes, different text types, and even anthologies of short stories. So in my own home library, for example, even after my kids have outgrown certain books, it doesn't mean we just throw them out. It doesn't mean we give them all away. We still keep some of the simple books around. I always try to have books at home that are slightly more difficult than what my kids are reading, so that at any time, if they choose to, they can always pick up something that's a little bit ahead of them so that they can improve their reading skills. All right, definitely different genres, because what we appreciate, the genres that we love, may not be the genres that our kids love. So have several genres, science fiction, fantasy, non-fiction, whatever you have, so that they can discover for themselves what they like and what they appreciate. When I was growing up, actually, one of the kinds of books I really loved to read were kids' encyclopedias. So when we were young, all of our information came from books, right? We didn't really have, we didn't have internet back then, I didn't. We didn't have such capable computers. All our information was from books. So I would just read all this encyclopedias, kids' books, illustrated, like dictionaries and encyclopedias full of facts. And so up to today, I really love finding out things. I really love information. I always want to know more. And I think that was really triggered from having all these non-fiction books at home when I was young. Now, it's really important, parents, that you don't discriminate between the types of things that they are reading. Now, I tried to show as wide a range of things as possible here. So you can see, for example, the National Geographic magazines, which are definitely non-fiction. There are newspapers, there are proper storybooks, there are graphic novels, comics, websites. Really, as long as they are reading, it is valuable, right? So I think a lot of parents have this fixation on like, oh, they must be reading storybooks, but it really can be anything. If they pick up Reader's Digest even, that's fine. If they decide to read the newspapers, which I know very few kids nowadays do, because not all of us have newspaper subscriptions anymore. So that was also something that I used to read when I was young, because I was so hungry for reading material. Nothing to read. What is new every day? Newspapers. The newspapers are always just there. So I would pick up the newspapers and read them cover to cover, reading all sorts of things and learning all sorts of things that, normally a 10-year-old, 12-year-old would not be exposed to, because I was so hungry for things to read. I used to read cereal boxes and shampoo bottles, okay, parents? That's how desperate I was for reading material. So basically not discriminating. Now, as an ex-school teacher and as a tuition teacher, as a parent, I know that there are some books that personally I really can't stand. Okay, I will be the first to admit now. The books that I can't stand are all on the screen here, and I'm sure a lot of you recognize them. At the bottom of the screen, there's Dogman, there's Geronimo Stilton, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Captain Underpants, and my daughter's favorite, whom I really I can't stand it, Horrid Henry. He's so ill-behaved. The David Walliams books, which, you can see by the titles: Bad Dad, Mr. Stink, Demon Dentist, Awful Auntie, Gangster Granny. I find it difficult to tell my children that these are good books to read. When I was young, when we were young, right, the hot books, everybody wanted to read Enid Blyton, right? Stories about gollywogs, stories about Toyland, the Enchanted Forest, the Wishing Chair, Naughtiest Girl in School. All these books are books I'm sure you're all very familiar with. Now, when I was young, my parents, Valerie Towers, one of my favorites, yes. So when I was young, my mom didn't like me to read all these books. She felt that Enid Blyton was too simple. She felt that Enid Blyton was too, she didn't really like Enid Blyton's books. So she told me not to read them. And of course, the more you tell kids not to read a certain book or a certain genre, the more they'll go and seek it out, right? So, I mean, in this sense, what I'm trying to say is that if the kids are reading, please don't tell them, don't read this book, it's not good for you. Because all they hear is don't read this book. Some of them who are less keen on reading, they'll be like, okay, but I only want to read this book. My parents say cannot read. My teacher says don't read them. So then I don't read it all. They'll just stop reading completely. So if they are reading, especially if they are struggling readers, if they are not interested in reading at all, no matter what they pick up, parents, of course, within reason, but, all these books, just let it go, to be honest with you, why I don't like Dogman is that Dogman has a lot of slang in it. There are a lot of misspelt words. They don't punctuate correctly. But if a kid starts out reading Dogman and starts getting interested and says, you know what, I really enjoyed this, I'm going to find out more. And then they ask their friends who enjoyed Dogman, what other books can you recommend for me that were similar? It just starts from there. So really don't discourage your kids from reading anything. You can talk to them about it. You can discuss with them. For example, Dogman, you can say, hey, do you know what's wrong with this sentence? Do you realize that the I should be capitalized, but they didn't do it? Things like that, just to raise their awareness so that they know, this isn't grammatically correct, but it's still fun to read nonetheless. All right, another good thing to do is to get them hooked on a series. So even though I can't stand David Walliams' books, but because it's an entire series, it's really easy for them to keep going. So they read one book, and then they say, well, I enjoyed this book. And so therefore, I will probably enjoy the next book in this series. So it gets them started. So collections all these books here, the authors are really clever. They write massive collections. They want you to get hooked. They are definitely kid pleasers. And so, you borrow one Horrid Henry book, you find yourself borrowing 20. All right, but again, at the end of the day, if they are not keen to read, it is still a gateway to reading, right? It's easy for them to keep picking something up rather than to waste that 20 minutes, like I mentioned just now, to stand around in the library not knowing what they want to read. At least they'll go straight for that shelf and pick up another book in that collection. All right, so I really think that collections of short stories are very ideal for kids. You can, if you want to take a screenshot of this, that's fine. These are books that I do recommend. I think they are good collections of short stories. The reason why I recommend short stories is, well, there are a lot of reasons. The first being is that your kids can't say they don't have time to finish. They don't have to read the whole book. They can read one short story today. They can save the rest of the short stories for another day. And yet they will have this feeling like, yeah, I completed one story. I finished one story. Now I can go back and read another one. Even if you don't finish reading all the stories in that book, at least you've finished, you feel like you've completed something. Number two, parents, I'm sure you're aware that every single part of their paper two, compre paper, their compre passage, their closed passages, even the compo that they have to write, these are all in themselves short stories. And so if you provide your kids with lots of examples of good short stories, then they will be better able to apply this understanding of how short stories works to their own examinations. So it's not just about reading. Of course, we do want to think about how they can improve in school. So to be able to say, okay, I know how a short story works. I know what the pace should be like. I don't have to introduce too many things. I only need 2 or 3 characters. It's a lot easier to understand when they consume short stories already. If they only read novels, and I find this especially for kids who like reading longer books, that they tend to try to write very complicated stories for compos because they're so used to these long, interesting novels that they try to apply the same concepts to their compos, and then they get very lost. Or they're too ambitious. I particularly like, and I would recommend the very first book here, Uncle Montague's Tales of Terror. But I will add a caveat, it's only for your kids if they enjoy scary stories. They are spooky, but they are not overly scary. I really enjoyed that series. He's got a few of them out. Tales of Terror from the Black Ship, Tales of Terror from the Tower, I think. They were really good. I really enjoyed that series. But if your kid is easily scared, then not so ideal, okay? So you might want to avoid. All right. Now, one other thing we can do for our kids is to create a welcoming reading environment. Now, I know I'm definitely not asking you to go and renovate your house and to make such beautiful, reading corners. You don't have to, but the concept is there, right? That we want a place that is well lit, that has a lamp for them if they want to read later in the day or in the evenings. By a window would be great. There'd be somewhere where they have good light. We don't want them to spoil their eyes, right? Secondly, we do want them to have something that's comfortable, something that's cozy, a place where they can be relatively undisturbed from younger siblings, or a place where they've got a couple of cushions for their back. And most importantly, we want their books to be within easy reach. So I had a parent who told me that also said they keep their books in a cupboard with all the books were too high for the kids to reach. So every time the kids wanted to read a book, they have to go to the dad or their mom and say, can I get that book, please? And then the dad will get it down for them. Now, parents, if the books are going to be so difficult to reach and so difficult to obtain, your kids are not going to want to get them. Okay, so definitely within reach. One very ideal way of displaying books, as you can see in the pictures here, is that we want the covers to be facing out. Why do we do this in the library? Why do we do this in the reading corner? Because when they see the front cover of a book, they're more likely to reach for it. They're more likely to pick it up. Okay, so that's why we do want to display some books facing outwards. Now, more on that would be to put up a small selection of books. Now, I have to admit that my own library at home can be very overwhelming because I've got so many books at home, even for my kids. I wish I could show you my library for the kids. It's like, it's all just spines, book spines facing outwards. So I realized that my kids don't read the books we have at home. They will go to the library, they pick out, 16 books every 2 weeks, they bring them home, and they only read the books that are in their library bag. So at first I was very upset, like, why do I have so many good books for you at home? And furthermore, the books that I stock for them at home are my favorites, the ones that I loved reading when I was growing up, the books that I think are very valuable, the books that I thought were very enjoyable, but they don't touch them at all. I did an experiment. I went to the library and I borrowed the exact same book and I brought it home and they read it. They said, wow, mommy, this book is so good, so nice to read. I said, we have it, we own it, it's in our shelf. But they don't look at it because our home library is just too overwhelming. It's just too many books to look at. So what I started doing was that I would pick out a few and I just leave it on their toy shelf. We've got a little a toy box, so on the top it's clear. So I put a couple of books there, and sure enough, when I just left them there, they pick them up to read because they're just there. They're within reach. They are low. It's not like they're faced with like 20 books to choose from. It's just 2 or 3. And so that was my trick to get them reading. Now, this is actually for you parents who are into Montessori. This is a very Montessori concept, right? The toy rotation, book rotation concept. So when kids are faced with just too many things, like my kids in the school library, there's just too much to look at. So I also applied that same technique for my kids in the school library. After a few weeks of realizing they're just taking far too long to decide, before lesson started, I would go and pick up 20 books and just lay them on the tables. And I told my students, if you can't decide, pick a book from here. These are books that I have read personally. I really enjoyed them. If you want me to tell you more about them, I will. And I found that they took a much shorter time to choose their books after that. So it really does help. Now, another thing that you can do is that if you go to the library, sneak some books into your book bag. So you tell them they have, if let's say you want to let them borrow 8 books, let them choose 6, pick up 2 of your own, put them into the book bag and borrow it yourself. And then once the books are available to them, they see it there, they are far more likely to pick it up to read. Okay, now these are all things that worked for me, so I really hope they do work for you as well. Now, one really important thing to do, parents, is to give them time to read. There is no point bringing the books home and having them displayed nicely and having a very cozy reading corner. If they have extra lessons all day long, if they have homework to do, if there is no sacred time put aside for reading. Now, not every child is like me, where, you know, I grab every single second that I could. When I'm in the car, I read, you know, when I'm in the toilet, I read, when I am waiting in the queue, I'm reading. So, you know, you don't have to ask me twice. But for a kid who is reluctant to read, you have to give them time. All right, let them be bored, give them a book, tell them this is your time for reading. Now, it's quiet time, which is great for parents. Tell them this is your reading time, go and sit down and finish your book. Okay, try not to interrupt the reading time. That means you shouldn't, I mean, we try, I understand it's hard at home, but try to prevent younger siblings from disturbing. In fact, younger siblings should also be reading, start them young. Just make sure that they don't fall asleep, okay? If their reading corner is too comfortable, sometimes you go in, you find that they are fast asleep in their reading corner. Now, it's really important, parents, to be a good role model in terms of reading. Now, I know it's hard because even for myself, a lot of my reading actually comes on my device. So I'm reading websites, I'm reading ebooks. But for my kids, all they see is mommy's on her phone again, right? Mommy's on the computer. But if they come over and they ask you what you're doing, tell them what you're doing. Oh, I'm reading this article about this thing. You don't even have to tell them. You can discuss with your kids. Oh, I was reading this article in the newspaper the other day about this thing that happened, this thing that happened. I read about this. What do you think? So draw them into what you are reading, involve them in what you are reading, show them that you are reading. Try to refrain from making disparaging comments. That means to say, oh, I don't like these books. This is very boring. Or I don't like this author. Or worse still, you say, I want you to read, but mommy doesn't like to read. I don't want to read books. You go and read. Okay, it's good for you, but don't ask me to read. So I do have parents who tell me, oh, it's very hard for me to sit down and read. Well, it's a good place to start. I think even for parents to sit down and read something. It doesn't have to be a book, like I said, you know, but make it clear to your children that you are also reading, that you are absorbing information, that you are learning as well. Now, it's important, and I always tell my kids this, I don't know, mommy doesn't know. Can you go and find out on your own, please? You know, I taught my daughter to use a dictionary, so she would come to me and say, what does this word mean? I'll tell them, you go and look it up first. If you still don't understand, then you come and ask me. It's good to admit that you don't know everything. It's good to tell them, you know, mommy doesn't know, daddy doesn't know, go and find out for yourselves. This also shows them how important reading is. It shows them how important it is to keep finding out things, to make it very real in your life. Okay. All right. So a lot of parents look at me like I'm a little bit crazy when I tell them, even when your kids are in primary school, even when your kids are in secondary school, parents, you can still read to your kids. And you can make it a bedtime habit. Before bedtime, read them a page, read them a chapter. You can do this even when they are teenagers. Parents, maybe some of you are shaking your heads at me like, I don't know what she's saying. I would like to show you a video very quickly. Let me just, okay, I hope you can hear it. This is actually a friend of mine. They used to live in Singapore. They've moved since then, but I used to talk to him and his wife, my friends, about how they parent, because they have 3 teenage boys, okay? And I'm sure those of you with boys understand that boys can be quite tricky to get them to love reading, because a lot of them are very active. You know, they want to go out and kick balls around. They want to go out and do things rather than sit down with a book. So I was asking them, how do you integrate reading into your daily life with your boys? And the answer that they gave me was really amazing. And so I asked him to record it for me. So just take a quick listen.
Towards the end of last year, I realized that I was struggling to spend meaningful time with my 3 boys. I was working very hard, long hours. When I came home in the evening, I was really tired, and I was even working weekends. I think that's normal for many moms and dads. I then went to Waterstones over lunch one day while I was at work in Canary Wharf, and I picked up a book called The Murderer's Ape, which was an award-winning book for young teenagers. And the intent then was to give it to my oldest boy, who wasn't that keen on reading, and I thought maybe, well, he'd like to spend time reading an interesting story. turns out I ended up reading this story to my boys over the next 4 months. It's about 600 pages, and we read 2-3 chapters a night. Most nights of the week, probably 5 or 6 nights in the week, we end up reading. And it's brilliant. What it does is, I'm really tired, but I can manage a few chapters with my children. They love it. It's really changed the way that we spend our time in the evening. They're calm, they're reflective, they're safe, they feel that they are being loved, and they love the story. They absolutely are engrossed in what's happening in this story of a gorilla living in Lisbon and going on multiple adventures. It's a great story, and I won't spoil it for you. But what I'm trying to say is, my 3 boys are not young. They're 9, 11, and 13, and they love it when I read to them at night. We're now on to a second book. It took us 4 months to read the first one, and the next book is great. But to get my children into bed in the evening isn't hard anymore. To spend great time with my children and talk to them about something that really matters, that works just fine. Try it out. Read to your older children, even if they're teenagers. Enjoy.
Okay, so that's my friend Dennis. I tell you, parents, when I first heard this, I was incredulous. I said, what? You're reading to your 13-year-old at night for bedtime? And I said, really? Does it really work? But you know, my kids still do love me reading to them. And sometimes I find it very incredulous, right? Because you could read this book. I mean, they read that book over 4 months. I could probably read that book in 2 days, you know, or a day if I sat down and really just read a storybook. And this book that they could have finished in 2 days, in 3 days, ends up being read over a month. But it's not just about the reading. I think you could see, as he said, it's not just about the reading. It's about the bonding. It's about having something to talk about with your kids. It's about inculcating that love of reading into your children. Okay, so it's definitely possible. Try it. Let me know how it works out for you. Some other tips I have for you is to definitely make use of our libraries. It is something that my kids and I do every 2 weeks. When I was young, my mother would take library cards from every relative that, you know, didn't want to borrow books from the library. So we ended up with like 8 or 9 library cards. At that time, the borrowing limit was 4 books, you know, so it was 4 times 9 or 4 times 8 or whatever it was. And we would finish all those books in like a week. You know, my kids now, we borrow, I think the limit for them, because I signed up for the premium membership, they each borrow 16 books, if I'm not wrong. So we have 32 books, parents, every 2 weeks, and they finish every single one. Now, granted, my kids are much younger, so the books are short, they are simpler, they are, you know, that she finishes reading them. Like I said, my older girl likes to read Horrid Henry and all those books that I cannot stand, but she reads them, you know, and she gets through all the books. So it's very valuable because our public libraries are an amazing resource. You can see that I have put up the pictures of some really beautiful ones. The one at Compass One is lovely. The one at Woodlands, I think, is really amazing. The one at Vivo City is really amazing. Bishan Library, there's an entire basement just for kids. You know, so these are really amazing libraries full of books. So you don't even have to spend a lot of money. You know, you can just go every 2 weeks and pick up a couple of books. Now, definitely get your kids to research the books that they want first. So it's worth getting them to look online to see which libraries have the books that they want. Maybe plan an outing with your kids to go and visit all the different libraries, tick them off your list. You know, it's not just about picking up books, but also going to see the place, enjoying the space. And if you cannot provide a quiet reading environment at home, the libraries have it all done for you already. So it's a great place to just hang out for the afternoon. A lot of parents ask me what books I recommend. So I already know that this question is going to come out. So I have preempted you guys. In NLB, very, very handily, they have booklets with suggested reads on them for different age groups. You can see, I think primary 5, primary 6, they have a basic level. So there's primary 5 for basic readers. That means kids who maybe are struggling a little bit more, need a little bit more help or reading simpler things. Don't get stuck in the age range. So please don't say, oh, my child is primary 6, so she must only read primary 6 books. No, parents, books are, you know, books don't have an age limit. I enjoy reading young adult fiction very, very much. You know, I really enjoy reading books like, you know, Hunger Games. which was made into a movie. I really enjoy young adult fiction. So I haven't grown up very much from my tastes, my childhood tastes. So don't restrict them to, you must only read primary 5 books if you're in primary 5, only primary 6. No, take home all the suggested read booklets, let them work their way through whatever book they find interesting. They are all valid, they are all great for reading. Okay, so these are really good booklets. They're available at every NLB, every National Library. You can go and pick them up. I think they have from primary 3 onwards, if I'm not wrong. If you don't have time to make it down to the libraries, we have ebooks and audiobooks that they can download. All right, so if you download Libby Library, the app on your mobile device, you can actually borrow books online. Okay, so that's one. If you can't make it to the library, this is something we can do digitally. Definitely empower your kids to read. Let them choose the books that they want. Get them to look up, books that they're interested in. Ask them to ask their friends, what books do they like? What books do your friends enjoy? Go and find out more about them. Look, again, like I mentioned just now, go and find out which libraries are carrying these books. Reserve them. One thing my daughter likes to do is to reserve books online, because she gets to go to the library and key in the number and the little door opens and it's like a present, that she has kept for herself. Hi, Sammy. All right, so it's really useful. I think all these things are great ways to get them involved and interested. There is actually a book bugs reading program at the library. So for every title that our kids borrow, they are entitled to some points that they can exchange for book bugs cards. So that's quite fun as well. Paul Jennings is a collection of really strange stories. He's an author. I think he is an Australian author, I'm not quite sure, which was very popular when I was young. He is still writing. I think he has like 40 something books under this range. And they are full of really weird, really strange, bizarre stories, the kinds that kids find really fascinating. So that's a title that you might want to check out for your kids. Again, short stories, they really help. When we were young parents, I think a lot of us were reading Goosebumps. A lot of us read Are You Afraid of the Dark? These are all along the same lines, right? So kids like these kind of creepy, strange stories. It's a good way to de-stress, I think. Most importantly, parents, it's really, really, really important, and I cannot stress this enough, that we have to get involved with our kids' reading habits. Read what your kids are reading so that you can talk about it with your children. And this was a really funny tweet that I found online. My kid can tell me all about a 24-minute episode of Paw Patrol in 76 minutes. Basically, what it really means is that, if the kids enjoy something, if they love something, they can't stop talking about it. And it's really hard, parents, to talk about Paw Patrol for 76 minutes. But I know that all of you have experienced this with whatever TV show or whatever movie that your kids enjoy. And it's so much easier if you know who the characters are, if you know what the characters have done, if you know what the story is about, if you can engage in that dialogue with your kids and show that you're invested, show that you're interested. And it's also good, of course, to, sometimes keep tabs on what they're reading, just so that you know the quality, or for content-wise or themes-wise, to make sure that they're reading things that are okay to read. Definitely push it a little bit further. It doesn't have to be just about talking about what they liked, what they didn't like. I think it's very important to make it a thoughtful process. Ask them to reflect, not in a structured way. I know some parents like to get their kids to sit down and write reflection journals and to write I know some parents print out worksheets for their kids. And then when I heard that, I'm like, I felt a little bit sad inside, because that's my job, parents. Let me do the worksheets. Okay, your job is to enjoy talking about reading with them. So not so much about the diaries and the journals, but really just about chatting, discuss with them and talk to them. So a level 1 kind of a response to books would be like, just to ask them, so did you like this book? If you didn't like it, that's fine. It's perfectly valid to dislike a book. Why didn't you like it? What was annoying about it? Is it because the ending wasn't satisfying? Get them to process these thoughts and feelings, explain how they feel, because the more they understand what they like about something, the more they understand what they dislike about something, it means that in future they will be better able to choose the books that they do like. It means that they learn how to voice their thoughts and feelings. So that's also good for writing, for writing their compositions. it's good for responding, it's good just for personal growth, right? To understand what you like, what you don't like, and to be able to put words to those feelings. If you want to put it even further, a lot of parents want to know, how can we make it explicit learning? So this is one thing that you can do. Get your kids to write down words from the books that they found were interesting, that they found were, unique. Don't focus so much on, I'm going to test you on spelling from this vocabulary list. While that's a good goal, at the same time, at the beginning, at the end of the day, we want them to enjoy reading. So if it becomes too much of a study thing, if it becomes too much of a work thing, of a homework thing, of goals they need to fulfill for learning, it doesn't really become something they enjoy. So instead of asking them to find words that are longer than 10 letters long, which is really not an ideal way to learn words, ask them what they found was interesting. What was a phrase that they thought was really, I've never heard this phrase before. What does it mean? A description of something that they thought was beautiful. These are all good things to talk about. All right, level 3, of course, if you want them to do things even further, you can get them to rewrite the ending. Again, you don't have to literally write it out. Ask them, how would you change the ending? How would you make it better? Do you think that what this character did was a good thing? So it's more about critical thinking rather than just, I like it, I don't like it. It's, what would you do if you were this character? How can we make the ending better? All right, so parents, this doesn't just work for reading. When I teach in my classes, I always tell my kids, it's not just about books. Tell me what you think about your favorite TV show. Tell me what you think about your favorite anime, your favorite movie. Talk about Avengers, that's fine, because movies and TV shows are also very good storytelling engines. How do we tell stories? We watch movies, right? A book can take you 4 months to finish, but a movie will always take you 2.5 hours. You will definitely be done with it in 2.5 hours because that's it, that's the movie. So if they're struggling with reading, start with TV shows, start this discussion process with the TV shows that they like. Ask them about their favorite anime characters. A lot of the kids are watching, what is that show called? It slipped my mind. There's this Kingdom something. I don't know. They're so into it. They talk about it all the time. Even if you can't get them to talk about anime, even if you can't get them to talk about TV shows, another good way to start is to talk about the games they play. Roblox. My kids talk about Roblox all the time. Minecraft, PUBG. So these are all things that they are doing, they are playing. It's really good to get the conversation started somewhere. If they like to play Minecraft, for example, there are lots of Minecraft books out there. Borrow those for them. That is our stepping stone. Some online resources, if you're interested in looking at them, there are lots of lists online with good lists of books if you want to look at them digitally. Book Trust is one of them. Goodreads is another. I think Macmillan has book lists that are really, really good. Lots of books that are normally sorted according to age. So they might say, for example, this one was collections of short stories for kids between 9 to 12 years old. Okay, so you can go and look up books and suggest these books to your children. There's also, Goodreads is another one. If they don't like to read, if you absolutely cannot get them to read, it's good to listen to audiobooks as well. Now, I like to tell parents that, audiobooks are good because your kids can fold clothes while they listen to audiobooks. They can do chores. You can mop the floor, tell them, okay, you know what, go and fold the laundry, listen to this audiobook. So there's something to engage them rather than, if you don't want them to be always watching TV, listen to the stories. Now, it also helps for listening comprehension because this exercises their hearing, their hearing, right? To listen to something rather than just reading. There's also Storyline Online, which I like because these are slightly simpler. So if your children are reluctant to read and they're not reading or they're reading simpler books, generally for primary, maybe 2 to 4, okay, these books are read by celebrities. So I really enjoy it because you can find books that are read by Thor, Chris Hemsworth, Sean Astin, as you can see, the first one on the screen. I don't know if you know who Sean Astin is. He played Sam in Lord of the Rings. So we have different celebrities, and if they like certain actors or actresses, you might be able to find them on Storyline Online. that's all I have for you for suggestions. Are there any questions for me? If you want to ask me more about reading, if you want to ask me more about how we can encourage our kids to read, I'm very happy to take questions. Let me just figure out how I get the chat back. Okay, I found it. Yeah, so that's all from me.
Share as well, right, Jobert?
Sorry?
Stop share.
Oh, yes, there you go.
Then you can see the parents.
Mm.
Yeah, parents, we have allocated some time for Q&A. So it'd be wonderful if you can unmute yourself and ask questions.
You can type it into
reading about the topic, yeah. Or you like to type into the chat box.
I think a lot of schools nowadays have mandated reading periods. So my daughter has to bring books to school. I think they spend like 10 to 20 minutes sometimes after like morning assembly, they've got to read. So reading is very much becoming, well, not becoming, I mean for the last, I think the last 10 years, more schools have been introducing more reading programs because they understand the value of reading. When I went for my MOE teacher's interview as a teacher, you know, the interviewers asked me, what do you think is the best way to get kids interested in English? What's the best way to get them to improve their English? And I said, the only way, the best way really is to read. You know, it doesn't have to be books. It can be magazines. It can be, like I said, even Reader's Digest, which I know isn't very readily available nowadays. I think they've gone online. National Geographic Kids has a really good subscription. They've got activities and things for children as well. Download ebooks. A Libby Library, they've got stuff. I think even if you use just YouTube, because YouTube has got a lot of books read by authors, books that are read by just people who read, you know. Let me just search for you very quickly. I use YouTube quite a lot when I was teaching the primary 1, primary 2 sets. I would just look up the books that I wanted on YouTube, and almost always you would be able to find, just a minute. Almost always you would always be able to find, especially if they're very popular kids books, people reading them out loud. Let me just look at me a minute.
You have other questions? Can type in the chat box. You want to screen share yourself?
Storytime at Oni's house is.
Yeah, share screen.
Okay, so if you Google, not Google, but if you search on YouTube, Storybook Read Aloud, there is Storytime at Oni's house. So all these books, Dragons Love Tacos. I love that one. It's a really good book for kids. The Day the Crayons Kids. So all these books are very popular books that you know, a lot of kids will be reading, or like Gruffalo's Child. All these books, very popular, Julia Donaldson. You can definitely find people reading them. Now, I always like to listen to them first because I personally have preferences about, you know, the way they are read or the kind of animations that they use. So just do a quick, watch them first, listen to them first. You might find it easier to use YouTube Kids. I think there is an app. So if you use YouTube Kids, you're less likely to get advertisements that might be strange. You're less likely to get videos that are not so desirable. So YouTube, I would say just be careful because YouTube is a jungle out there. So definitely parent-led only. Yeah, that's my personal preference.
Yeah.
So if you just Google storybooks read aloud, there's loads of them online. And these are all very popular books. So the Rainbow Fish is very popular. Dr. Seuss books. Never Tickle a Tiger, I love that one. So these are all really good books to look for online.
The parents will be waiting for you to read them aloud in the future.
Oh, not your typical dragon. We did this in class. It's really cute. Yeah, so it's good also to look for books that I think that teach certain themes, right? So I used to like to choose books that are, like not your typical dragon. It's about a dragon who's different from everyone else. How do we deal with someone who is different? How do we treat someone who's different? So all these things are also good teaching points. They're also good things to talk about with your kids after that. If you want to look for if your kids are in lower primary, there are actually lists of books that they provide to primary school kids under the Stellar program. So not all schools, no, schools don't read all the books on that list. Some kids like to re-watch books that they've done in school. So that's a good way to connect, right? Like they've seen this book in school or they've read this book in school. Now I can watch it at home or read it at home with my parents. And then they get to talk about it, like, oh, what do we do in school? What, you know, and then the whole list of Stellar books, I think, is a very good resource to use if you're looking for lower primary books, because those are all vetted by MOE. Yeah, and if they do it later on in school and they've already read it, that's fine. You know, there's absolutely no problem with that. In fact, probably even better if your kids are not so comfortable with reading, they have some prior knowledge, they've already seen this book, they might feel very good in school, you know, like, wow, I read this book in school, I read this book at home with my parents, and then they will have more to say about it rather than looking at it for the first time.
Nice.
It's rare that in Singapore there's no library really nearby. I think we have quite a few, maybe not so accessible.
We may have guests from Indonesia.
Okay. Yeah, so YouTube is a good resource. Again, like I said, maybe parent-led, but that's a good resource. I think Libby Library is open for everyone to use. And then there was Storyline Online, which is also, yeah, good for using. Audible, if I'm not wrong, last year they were offering it free as long as American schools were closed due to the pandemic, and they are still closed. So I think it's still free, actually. So you can still use Audible, yeah, which belongs to Amazon.
Yeah. Parents, any other questions? Like JW, Eric, Han, Jermaine, Sharon, or Patricia? You can also type in the chat box or you can unmute yourself. We're almost ending. So I'm not too sure if you have other plans, like now it's already 8, put your kids to bed. Please feel free to go. But if you want to just have another 5 minutes, you can remain behind. And if you have any other question regarding our lessons, you can always drop us an email, go to our website, sign up for trial lessons. TCher Jovan, yeah, does teach a few lessons, not many. And if you have any other question, you can yeah, call us. Patricia, you love reading. Thank you for the tips. Okay, thank you, Patricia.
Thank you for listening to me talk for 1 hour.
Yeah. Thank you, Mitchuan. Yeah, so if you like to stay for another just 3-4 minutes, yeah, we will go soon at about 8:05 because I think Jobav's daughters are not well also. So anything else, Mitchuan or anyone? If not, you can actually email us or go to our website. We are contactable via our website. There's actually an email address there. Okay. I think that's about it, right?
Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that whatever I shared was helpful. If you want to ask about anything, feel free to email. I'll try and get back to you as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you, parents.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Facebook Live as well, parents on Facebook Live. Okay, thank you.